Howdy, and welcome to Texas A&M's Virtual Campus Sustainability Month. Hope everyone's having a great Friday and maybe enjoying this colder weather. I know I certainly am. So today we have Lily Tetu. She's here to talk to you about intersectional environmentalism. This is a kind of an emerging topic in the world of sustainability, one that is really important, and especially if you're kind of thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues and how important those are. This is definitely kind of like the next kind of, I guess, way to really think about that and how we can make our environmental movement much more inclusive and open and representative to all of us. So I think it should be a really interesting conversation. I'm really looking forward to that. And before we get to that, I just want to go over a couple of our kind of ground rule suggestions here for today. The first thing I want you to do is on the top right of the bar, you'll see something where you can turn on side-by-side mode. That's the best way you can view this presentation, so I recommend turning that on. You also have the opportunity to turn on subtitles if that's the way that you would like to view this. We ask that you please mute your mics just so we don't have any distractions, any sounds. And then also you can ask questions. You can ask them throughout Lily's talk. Just drop those in the chat. At the very end, we'll have a time for discussion. So that will really help us have a better discussion if you throw some questions in the chat as you go. So things you're just curious about or things you want to comment on, it'd be really helpful. And while we're in the discussion portion, there's two different ways you can engage outside of putting questions in the chat. You can use the raise your hand feature and I'll call on you, or Lily will call on you. And then you can also just turn on your video, or you can turn on your audio and you can just ask your question when you have a chance to do that. There's not a whole lot of us that are viewing live, so that won't be a big problem. And then a couple of things with the office, a couple of office features. We want you to be aware that we do have Sustainability Champion Awards. You can recognize a student, a staff, a faculty. They all can get their own awards for what they're doing to make Texas A&M more sustainable. So please check that out. The applications are going to open on the 19th of October. And then we will also have our internship program. So Lily is one of our interns. This is her second semester with us, and we're going to open that up for new recruits for the spring 2021. And those will open on October 26th. We'll have information posted on our website, on our social media. We'll send out a campus-wide email, so check that out. And I also realize that you may be interested in the prizes that we have to offer. So let me just explain to you how you're able to claim those. So there's going to be a code word over the course of this presentation. Lily might speak it. I might drop it in the chat. It could be written on a slide. So pay attention. When you hear that code word, write it down, keep track of it. Because you use those code words. Every presentation has one individual code word. And if you get two, you can get a water bottle from our office. If you get three, you can get a t-shirt. If you get 5 code words, then you can actually have the water bottle and the t-shirt. You notice we have a couple color choices for the t-shirt. And what I want you to do is once you've collected all your code words, just send one email with all the code words you've collected to sustainability@tamu.edu, and we'll arrange a time for you to be able to pick up your prize. And you have to make sure that you're on the College Station campus. You have to pick it up physically. We're not able to ship those, unfortunately. And also, you don't have to watch this live. You can watch it after the fact. So don't feel like if this is conflicting with your class schedule that you can't watch it later. There's always a great time to learn about sustainability. So with that, that's everything I wanted to go over. I'm going to pass it over to Lily. She's going to take it away. Lily, whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Ben. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Everyone can see that? All right. I'm going to say yes. Okay. So my name's Lily. I'm going to be talking about the importance of intersectional environmentalism today. Before we get started, I think it's important to define some terms for you guys. So intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a professor of law at UCLA and Columbia Law School. She was a leading scholar of the critical race theory and was the reason that this term became popular within law. And she defines it as the complex cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, or classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experience of marginalized individuals or groups. So the way that I would explain this to someone is like, take a Black trans woman. she could be discriminated against for her race or for her gender, and possibly even class, sexual orientation, sexuality. And because she's being discriminated against on these two topics or more, it sort of intensifies that and creates a unique experience that's unique to that certain group. So intersectional environmentalism is based off of this term and was coined recently by Leah Thomas, who is founder of Intersectional Environmentalists. She's an activist and eco-communicator. She majored in environmental science, which brought this to my attention. She created like a pledge for environmentalists to Black Lives Matter. And so she defines it as an inclusive version of environmentalism that advocates for both the protection of people and the planet. It identifies the ways in which injustices happening to marginalized communities and the earth are interconnected. It brings injustices done to the most vulnerable communities and the earth to the forefront and does not minimize or silence social inequality. And that last sentiment is what I find most important. It doesn't silence social inequality, it brings it into the picture and helps create a more sustainable world for everyone equally. And considering social sustainability within that is very important. And so you might ask what environmentalism has to do with social justice or inclusion. And that is sort of based on this term environmental justice, which we talk about in environmental science a lot. And I'm going to play a short 1-minute clip to sort of summarize that for you guys.
Okay, so this is a city. Here are all the people living in it, people of all different colors, ages, births, and incomes. Except they don't all live together in the same place. They're separated into different parts of the city by what color they are, what language they speak, and how much money they have. And those different parts of the city look quite different. The parts that are whiter and wealthier tend to have green spaces, grocery stores with nutritious organic food, and of course the money to buy it, and are often far away from pollution-emitting freeways. The parts that are poorer and more diverse tend to have industrial sites, heavy-duty diesel-polluted ports and highways, and hazardous waste, all things that the city relies on to run properly, but that heavily pollute the air and water. And even if they had those grocery stores with nutritious organic food, most residents there couldn't afford it anyway. How did this happen?
All right, so that sort of summarizes it. As you can see, there's a huge disparity between low income and higher income people, and as well as people of color and white people. And within environmentalism in the past, which we'll touch on a little bit later, the movement has largely been white males of higher wealth status that have been representing environmentalism, and that doesn't necessarily reflect the entire population and who it's aimed to protect. And before we get into that, I just wanted to show, this is a chart of poverty rates by race and ethnicity within America. You can see the top row is total within the United States. I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that people of color are more likely to fall below the poverty line in America, at least. And I included some key states here for different reasons. Illinois has in the past been known for redlining, and that affects a lot of issues related to poverty within the state. And you can see that reflected here. 8% of white people fall below the poverty line, and then 24% of Black Americans or Black people that live in Illinois are below the poverty line. And another key state is Mississippi, which is also the code word. I'll remind y'all later, but Mississippi is my code word. It has the largest poverty rate out of any state in the United States. And if you look at the American Indian Alaska Native category, 39% fall below the poverty line, which is a huge number. And then Ohio, I included Ohio because it had a huge population of Black Ohioans, I believe that's what they call themselves, that are below the poverty line compared to whites. And then Texas, of course, for your information, since we're located in Texas. But there is a huge correlation within people of color and poverty rates, and that'll be important going forward. And, you know, to kind of match that, Latinx people and Black Americans are more likely to be alarmed or concerned about global warming than white people are, which makes sense because it hits those populations the hardest. And that's not necessarily what we see in environmentalism, who we highlight within leaders in environmentalism. In correlation with this data as well, Latinx and Black Americans are more likely to take action to convince elected officials to recognize global warming and climate change, more so than white people, again, because it affects them more. And again, it is not proportionally represented that way in environmental movements, in organizations and government that are related to climate change. So, like I said in the past, green has been white. So the environmental movement has been associated with, you know, white people, wealthier people, and in the early days, males. So many of you might know John Muir. He has many monuments and trails named after him. He's called father of the national parks. He, you know, saved Yosemite before it was recognized as a national park, etc. But he's also been known to use racial slurs, you know, have racist remarks against Black and Indigenous people. He sort of remarketed these, you know, wild lands as untouched and, you know, away from man, when Indigenous people had been caring for these areas for thousands of years. He sort of like took credit for the beauty of these spaces. And, you know, as late as even the 70s, John Muir created the Sierra Club, which is a huge environmental organization, nonprofit. They voted, 40% of the Sierra Club voted to not concern themselves with, they say the urban poor and ethnic minorities, and only 15% align themselves with these topics. So, you know, as recent as the 70s, this movement has not paid attention to people of color and low-income people. Another key figure within environmentalism is Madison Grant, who works closely with Teddy Roosevelt. He did a lot for California redwoods and American bison, worked with the Bronx Zoo. He was a wildlife zoologist. He did a lot for environmentalism as a whole, but he is largely known for his book called The Passing of the Great Race and the Racial Bias of European History, which essentially was describing the decline of Nordic people, despite, you know, their, the words he puts it in, they're marked by noble, generous instincts and a gift for political governance. And, you know, he advocated for white supremacy as well as being an environmentalist. And to kind of put that in perspective, Adolf Hitler wrote him a letter calling that book his Bible. So that shows you kind of who he concerned himself with, and, you know, in that aspect of his life. And then the last figure we have here is Gifford Pinchot. You might know him. He was the first head of the U.S. Forest Service and a big name within environmentalism, within conservation as well. But he served as a delegate on the first and second International Eugenics Congress, and within the American Eugenics Society was a member. You know, another case of white supremacy being tied with the environmentalist movement. And, you know, we don't have a great foundation to work off of at the beginning of, you know, the environmental movement. So that's sort of the history of it. And we definitely need to change that. So shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about how how from then on we've neglected these marginalized communities within the environmental movement. So many of you might have heard of zero waste living or low impact living. I included a little scroll through of some YouTube videos. So like zero waste tips, zero waste swaps. Some of them are even like for beginners, for advanced. And this is problematic in a lot of ways. They come from a place of privilege, and we'll kind of go through that one by one. So takeout is a big thing within the zero waste community. They try to discourage, like these takeout containers, like maybe you go get Chinese food or McDonald's or something, and it comes with all this waste, or, buying like plastic wrapped foods. They try to discourage that, but that also ignores the fact that families are low on time, low on income, especially during a pandemic, and takeout is a lot of times the best way for them to get a lot of calories or some sort of nutrients. That's the most efficient way they can get food sometimes, and that they just don't have the choice to make a low impact home cooked meal right now. And then in conjunction with this a little bit is the freedom to even buy plastic free. Some people only have one store available to them where these items that they need to eat are wrapped in plastic, and there's no alternative to that. They don't have like a bulk food store near them, or options, which we'll talk about later, options for fresh produce. Sustainable and zero waste products are also problematic in their own ways. They can be expensive. They can even be items that you have in your own house, like reusing tubs of butter for different food items, which people of color have done forever, reusing items because they have to, not because it's trendy. Or bringing your own Tupperware. It doesn't have to be a cute colored Tupperware. It can just be reusing an old food container from before. So they often like push that you need to have these like new produced zero waste products, when you could be pushing for really the more sustainable option, which is to use what you already have. Time commitments. This also ties in with veganism and food deserts, in my opinion, because people will push for eating more fruits and vegetables. It's lower waste, it's lower impact, but food deserts are a huge problem in America. Not everyone has access to a farmer's market or even a supermarket. Some people only have a corner store near them. And then that can be hours away. You might not have a vehicle, you may have to take a bus. And that's just a problem in and of itself, which, we would like to fix, but that's ignoring this huge population of people that don't have access to that, don't have time to, curate this vegan like lifestyle. And there's a way to push for that without ignoring marginalized communities. So another aspect of the environmentalist movement that we talk about a lot is plastic production. So production and disposal of plastic. This picture right here is of Cancer Alley. If you don't know, Cancer Alley is about an 85-mile stretch of Louisiana next to the Mississippi River. Again, code word Mississippi. It contains about 150 industrial plants, and everyone within this area of Cancer Alley either has been affected by cancer in their home or knows someone that has died of cancer. And this is definitely an interesting topic. I recommend looking into it more, but this is not in an area of wealthy white people. This is in like an area that has a large population of people of color. Same thing with Flint, Michigan. Michigan's about 80% white, but Flint has an extreme number of people of color, and that's where the environmental disaster occurred. So this happens with more than plastic production, but the production of items using fossil fuels is especially harmful, and their disposal also creates toxic chemicals that have largely affected people of color in low-income areas in the past. And some kind of jarring facts that I found, 56% of populations near toxic waste sites consist of people of color, so more than half. 38% are more likely to have nitrogen dioxide exposure. People of color are 2 times more likely to live without potable water and modern sanitation. And this one is really infuriating. 95% of claims that have been submitted to the EPA against polluters have been denied. So in its 20 plus years, the EPA has this office called the Civil Rights Office. It has never made a formal finding of discrimination in terms of environmental injustice in its entire history, which even from the short presentation you've seen, that's obviously incorrect. And that is just sort of due to the fact that the larger problem that people of color lack representation in government and lack the political clout to make changes because of systematic racism, amongst other problems, and also due to voter suppression. You can see on this little slide here, there's a little voter suppression bingo, but a couple I wanted to highlight. Incarcerated individuals, they're not able to vote. Polling location changes, like we actually just had with Greg Abbott changing the amount of polling locations last minute, gerrymandering of districts, diluting people's votes. It's not a paid federal holiday, which prevents a lot of people from going and waiting in these long lines. And, the push that voter fraud occurs through mail-in ballots, which would be a great solution for people that aren't able to take off work. You've heard all of the stuff that mail-in ballots are linked to fraud, which is untrue. And then voter ID laws prevent a lot of people from voting because it's especially hard to get a government-issued ID. And then some solutions to these problems. So I included some of these. This is Leah Thomas's company called Intersectional Environmentalist, their accountability program. This is especially important. I think it's so important to keep your environmental groups or even government accountable when they say that they will be more diverse. And this is just a way to do that. But of course, you can do it yourself through activism, through just general communication if you're involved in that environmental group, or you could participate in activism against your state, local, federal governments. Email them, make them more accountable, email your representatives that are supposed to vote in your interest. So in general, keeping these groups accountable, speaking up, participating in activism are great solutions to fixing this problem. Also, voting is a great solution. So some takeaways that I want y'all to remember: we need people of color and diversity in general within environmental leaders. We need to know that zero or low waste living, plant-based diets, and voting are not as inclusive as they seem. So, telling people to go vegan or go vote is not as simple as you may think. And I'm willing to bet everyone here has some sort of privilege that they can use as a tool to support plastic alternatives, engage in activism, and vote out leaders that don't recognize voter suppression, or, vote out leaders that don't recognize climate change, they don't promote diversity, all the problems that sort of lead into intersectional environmentalism as a whole. Go vote. It's early voting right now, just a reminder. And all right, these are some of my sources that I found especially interesting. There are more, of course, but feel free to contact me about those. and I am open to any questions if anyone has any.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation, Lily. I think, you know, it was just really, really interesting to see that, you know, I think a lot of times when we think about, you know, the environment or how we're going to save the planet, a lot of times people are left out of that equation. And in particular, issues of diversity are left out of that equation. So I think you just made a really strong case for why we can't, you know, really consider any problems that we're facing without looking at, you know, race, class, gender, and all these other issues that make up, you know, the DEI spectrum, and just how important that is, because you really can't solve these problems, because at the end of the day, there are people problems. So I think you really made a strong case for that. So really appreciate that. I think you gave a lot of insight, and helped us kind of reframe how we think about how we would go about saving the planet or addressing these issues. So I do have one question in the chat so far, and I have a number of questions I wrote down. How did you get interested in this topic?
So, two things. In general, we were just talking about environmental justice in my classes. When, you know, like the killing of George Floyd happened and like Black Lives Matter was like a topic that people were talking about, we like wanted to incorporate it into what we were talking about in class. So that kind of sparked my interest. And then that post that I saw by Leah Thomas, it was like a pledge. I recommend everyone checking it out. It's an environmentalist pledge to be more inclusive and to be more intersectional. And, you know, I thought I should incorporate that more into what I do, because we are only as good as our most vulnerable. So that's what we always say, even in our internship. So that post was what really sparked my interest for this topic.
So when you say post, where did you see this post?
It's on Instagram, but I saw some articles that also included it. I think if you look up Leah Thomas, something should come up about it.
So do you get like a lot of your information through Instagram or social media, and do you kind of find that like a really like a valuable tool to learn more about these things?
That's a great question. I think it's a good tool to like spark your interest in something. Like maybe someone has a perspective that you haven't heard about, or like they're talking about a topic you don't know about, but definitely not like base facts off of Instagram. Like I say, like for communication, for awareness, but not, you know, for hardcore research.
So do you think like you kind of get like a general idea, like maybe you were introduced to this topic that you hadn't heard about, you saw it on Instagram, but then did you go and do some more research after the fact, and you didn't just trust what you saw on social media?
Exactly. Yeah. And just like get into the specifics of it.
And then shameless plug, you can follow our Instagram at Sustainable TAMU. And Lily, I think you have a page you're trying to grow where you post some information like this too. Do you want to share that account with us?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to follow it, it's called Sustainability, like my name instead of sustainability. I
How do you
just
spell
started
that?
a little
Sustain,
take
sustain,
stop at the last L of sustainability and then ILY. If that makes sense.
ILY. I think I got it right in the chat. I dropped it in the chat if y'all wanted
Yeah.
to. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead and give her a follow if you want to learn some more of this content. I know she posts some cool stuff after she does some research. So thank you for that. I don't know if I have any other questions in the chat. One person just said, great job. They really appreciate that you shared this information, and they think that it needs to be talked about more, which, you know, I couldn't agree with more. I was wondering, so you talked a lot about kind of the early foundations of the environmental movement. You looked at like John Muir and those other folks, and you noticed that those were both men. They were all three of those were men. They were all white men. And quite often we think about leaders in the environmental movement, from, you know, John Muir to Aldo Leopold, it's white men that are getting the credit. Yet it's often women that are doing a lot of the environmental work. And if you attend something like a sustainability conference, you'll notice that there is far more women than men in attendance. Why do you think it is that, even though it appears as though women are doing the majority of the actual work, that men, white men in particular, are getting the credit for it?
Yeah. And I think that's part of just a larger like problem. I see this in a lot of different fields too. Like we tend to think of like healthcare professionals as men, but there's a ton of women within that. I think that's just, at least in America, with like white men being in positions of power, so that's kind of set the precedent. And I think we're starting to change that a little bit, but even like our 2 presidential candidates are still white men. Like that's just what we default to almost. Like,
Yeah,
and
so
then of course they had the power back when the environmental movement started to actually make changes, but it hasn't necessarily caught up to today.
so kind of like you mentioned, systemic racism and possibly like the patriarchy, would that be kind of what you would put that on? So larger kind of societal issues.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Okay.
it's intersectional. It's a lot of different problems.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. All right. I don't know if there's any other questions that people have in the chat. I have a few more that I can ask because I just find this topic really interesting. I guess I was also wondering, you're talking about zero waste, and you were talking about how there are certain products that are marketed, it's like you need to buy these products to be zero waste. And does that tie into capitalism at all, especially when you're saying that there's already products that exist, you could reuse items, people that have lower incomes have been living like this, not by choice, but because they have to for a long time. So they already have a lot of techniques, to live zero waste.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you might have heard of greenwashing, Ben, I know you have, but like it's like trendy to be environmentally friendly now. So 100% companies are making like sustainable or like green products to sell more, which is obviously the opposite of like what you want to do. Like especially cleaning products, you can use household items to clean, but big companies like Target has an environmentally friendly line. Like it's definitely like being capitalized upon the entire like earth friendly movement.
Yeah, so I guess like is it sustainable to buy something like a new product that's marketed as being sustainable to replace something that you already own that would work the same?
No,
It's
I
not.
mean, unless it doesn't work or
I
you've
mean,
gotten rid of it for some reason, given it to a friend or something, then no.
so even if you buy a sustainable product like that, you're still being a consumer, right? You're still consuming.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then I think that was probably my last question that I had to have today. I guess the only thing I wanted to kind of just point out to people, if you remember the slide that Lily showed about the toxic waste sites, and that 56% of people that live near those waste sites are people of color, I think it's also just kind of important to keep in mind that about 65% of our country is actually white. So that's like a really major disparity. Even if you look at just 56%, it's a really big disparity if you look at our actual population figures. So I just wanted to point that out. Oh, and actually we do have a question. Someone else said, great job, Lily. And another question is, what would be considered greenwashing? I think they just wanted maybe a little bit more explanation about what greenwashing was, maybe a couple examples.
Yeah. So I would consider that greenwashing, like making a product in order to sell it to people that, it's so hard to explain. Like if I were to make like a sustainable utensil set when people already have that, I'd consider that greenwashing because you're advertising it as earth friendly when that's not the most earth friendly option. But the most common example of greenwashing would be like an oil company touting its like eco-friendly practices. Like that's the main causer of pollution and toxic chemicals and etc. But they are spouting like something eco-friendly to promote that when it's not. Anything like that, like cleaning products, you see it a lot. Like, or even like a classic example I've heard is like diapers being like pure, but and they're advertised as like organic cotton when like 1% of it is organic cotton. And then disposable diapers are like a huge contributor to landfills. So things like that, like advertising something as earth friendly when like maybe one part of it is, or like even none of it is, you know? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that was a really good explanation. And I think maybe another way that you could think about greenwashing is like advertising, or for example, like let's say a big oil company, and we know that oil companies are they're one of the largest contributors to, you know, greenhouse gases and climate change, much more disproportionate than any other industry. But then they may have like a, you know, a sustainability branch where they're going to maybe try to have like sustainable oil or something like that. Like that would be an example of greenwashing, where the actual activity of the company is very destructive to the environment. What they're doing overall is very destructive to the environment. But they have like this one little kind of branch or area where, you know, they're trying to show how they're helping the environment. And really how they would help the environment would be to transition away from, you know, that gathering of oil and move into a new kind of energy sector. That would be a way that they could do it and actually be sustainable. But the greenwashing is just kind of like trying to put like a band-aid on top. Like, no, look at, these are the things that we're doing, but not really addressing the real elephant in the room. So that'd be another way. It looks like we have someone would like to share a story. That's great. If you want to share a story, feel free. You can turn on your video, or you can unmute your mic, either way. And whenever you're ready, go ahead and do that.
I just want to share a story that I saw recently online that actually my friend posted, and sparked a lot of conversation around it, which is something that I think the Sustainability Office always focused on, which is fast fashion. And the main idea in that post is talking about, you know, we always talk about some brand like Patagonia, they are being quote unquote environmental friendly. They are, but for a lot of like students or like working class people, those are pretty expensive brand to be a customer of, you know? And a lot of people have been doing the things that we talk about in this session, is that we are reusing, we are trying to keep the stuff that we have. Maybe they are fast fashion brands. Maybe we own a lot of H&M, we own a lot of this kind of brand, but we are using them for a long period of time. We are not like throwing stuff out and then buy every season we buy new stuff. And that's, for me, it's like environmentally friendly or sustainable enough to do that, instead of, you know, pushing people, you know, shaming people into buying this high-end, you know, super expensive environmental friendly brands, instead of, you know, trying to encourage people to use the thing that they already have.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Go ahead, Lily. Sorry.
No, yeah, that's another reason that people are kind of like, I never think that shame is like a good way to get people into like being more conscious, and like definitely like pointing out brands and being like, that brand's bad, when maybe you've had that shirt for 20 years and, you know, maybe it's not the best brand now, but, you know, it's better than buying that same shirt from Patagonia when you had it at home and it was perfectly fine. Maybe you've repaired it, and that's even better.
And I mean, and if you already own it and you throw it away or get rid of it and buy something new, that's not necessarily being sustainable either. So I really like what, that was a really good story. Thanks for sharing that. If you have the article, the link to the story, you could feel free to drop it in the chat if other people wanted to check out the story. But it also just, I think what you responded with, Lily, that you said a lot of times there's like shame that people try to give out, you know, to other people, that maybe they can't afford to buy these like high-end items. So I think that's just like a really good point, that that's not the way for us to have and create a inclusive sustainability movement. You know, it's not about what products that you can buy. It's about making, you know, it's about making the choices that you can make and doing the things that you can do in your life. And realizing there's lots of different options. There's lots of ways to be sustainable. So I think that's really cool, really cool. And this, we have another comment that says, I have heard that donating clothes is unsustainable since most of them get thrown away. And yeah, I do think there is definitely some truth to that. I've heard that too. You know, a lot of those clothes don't end up getting utilized. Yeah, a lot of them are thrown away, and they're not even like repurposed. They're turned into thread or yarn, which would be a lot better use. So sometimes rather than giving your clothes away, just use them as long as you can, and then maybe you can turn them into rags yourself, or you could turn it into yarn if that's something that you do, if you like to knit or whatever.
I would suggest using like websites like Facebook Marketplace or like Poshmark or Depop. That's what I do. So you know that someone, even if you sell it for like $1, it goes to someone's home that's going to use it, instead of like giving it like in masses to like thrift stores.
Yeah, and it's also not a bad thing that you're going to get a little bit of value back for the item that you purchased. So it can help your own personal finances and your own personal economy as well. So that was a lot of really great questions. I know we're running a little over time. Thank you all still for participating. I'm just going to really quickly just share my screen and just show you what we have coming up next. And then I'll let y'all get on with your day. So what I just wanted to point out, we actually have another talk this afternoon at 3 p.m. Shreya is going to talk to us about colorism, and where we're looking at issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're thinking about things like racism. Sometimes people don't discuss or understand what colorism is. So this will be a bit of an intro to that, to have an understanding of what that is. So I think that'll be really interesting, and we encourage you to check it out. And then on October 19th, which is Monday, we're going to have a talk from Jessica. She's going to talk to us about geoengineering, something that I haven't seen a lot of conversation around either. So encourage you to check that out. And then Kendall on the same day, Jessica's is at 10, and then at 11 on the same day, Kendall's going to talk to us about endangered species and how those are impacted by COVID-19. And I know I haven't even considered that as a possibility. So just a lot of really interesting topics we have. Come expand your knowledge about sustainability and these issues. And I usually drop the code word on this slide, but Lily has said it at least 2 times in this presentation. So I am not going to put it on this slide, and I'm not going to say it because I don't want to keep giving freebies away to people. So go and make sure you rewatch this if you missed the code word and you came to this slide just to see it because you saw it on the other ones. Not happening this time. All right, y'all. Y'all have a great rest of your Friday. We hope, please come and see us at 3. And thank you, Lily, for that great presentation. And thanks, everyone, for your time and your attention and hanging with us as we went a little over time. Hope y'all have a great day. Everyone, take care.
Thank you, Benton. I think someone asked a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Where can we review the recording? It is on the same webpage that you saw the link, our website. It'll be there. It'll say recorded link, and it'll be posted. So the ones that we've had so far, they're already all posted, and I will get Lily's posted as soon as it finishes processing and I have a chance to do that. So it'll be there later today or on Monday, hopefully. So with that, thank y'all. Thanks, everyone. And I'll have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.